We meet on holy ground, for that place is holy where we meet each other, where lives touch, where love moves, where hope stirs. How strong is our need for one another, our silent beckoning to our neighbors, our invitation to share life and death together, our welcome into the lives of those we meet, and their welcoming into our own. Come now, let us worship together. Good morning, everyone. Oh, you can do better than that. Come on. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, that's what we want. We want some energy in here. It's cool in here. It's kind of muggy. It's cool in here. This is nice. We have a bit more energy. I'm Reverend Hank Purse. I am your interim minister, for those of you who don't know. And I am so pleased to be here today, to be here with all of you on this really lovely day. And at this point, I will turn the welcoming greeting over to Melinda.
Good morning. My name's Melinda Collins, and I'm a member of the worship committee, and I would like to extend a welcome to everyone. Been here for a long time? Welcome. New? Welcome. And if you are new, please take a welcome packet from the pew rack, and there's also a card that can fill you in on things like our ushers who are here to assist you with listening devices and large print order of worships, and we have greeters, Deb, and who's in the back in blue, and Anne, who is around somewhere. They'll be at the doors. Oh, there she is in red. They'll be at the doors at the end of the service, and if you could go to social hour with them, I know they'd be thrilled to introduce you to people and show you around a little. I'd like to remind us all now to take out our cell phones and turn them off. I know Reverend Hank says worship mode, but if you can and you're not going to be paged, off would be great. We have childcare for those who need it. I don't think that's something today, but just in case, you can always tell other people if they need it that down this hallway we have wonderful sitters who are well-trained and caring. We also have announcements in the order of worship, so if you could peruse those, they will inform you about life in congregation, and also during the offering, if you are new, get that yellow card out of the packet, put your name on it, and you can get weekly emails, and we can get to know you with, we can give you a name tag so we know who you are. I want to remind everyone, and maybe to inform new people, that you belong here. You belong, even if it's just for today, for the service. But we hope that you take that feeling of belonging with you, because this is the faith of radical welcome. You don't have to be like anybody else. You're just welcome because you're you. And that means everything in the world. So in that spirit, let's take a moment to welcome each other. And anybody who'd like to move, when you go to welcome people, feel free to come sit up front. Please join us in singing hymn 318 in the gray hymnal.
leave actually, no, you can have a seat. I'm still getting the hang of this place. Sorry about that. Sorry. Our chalice lighting, the words. We shall saunter to the Holy Land, towards the Holy Land, till one day the sun shall shine more brightly than ever it has done before, and shall perchance shine into our minds and our hearts, and light up our whole lives with a great awakening light. And now will you join me in repeating the unison call to worship printed in your order of worship. Come, let us gather. We gather to celebrate the sacred within and among us. We come to seek spiritual growth and understanding. We strive to practice acceptance, forgiveness, and love. Together we work to build a world of justice and compassion. Come, let us gather together. Well, all right. Well, on this first day of Sunday school, we're going to take a moment to dedicate and commission those among us who have chosen to take on this important responsibility for teaching. And at this time, first person I want to invite up is Miriam. Where's Miriam? Oh, there you are. Come on up. Miriam, who of course is our Director of Religious Education. I want her to come up here. And then I want to also invite all of you who are going to teach Sunday school this year to come up here, get your stuff, come on up here, join us up here. I mentioned this last week during the teacher training, yes. As they come on up here, I want to remind you and let you know that there are a group of teachers who are downstairs teaching spirit play, and so they're down there, not up here with us, and they're already down there with the little ones doing the work to which we dedicate them. Now, I have a number of questions, of the statements, and then your response is very easy. It's 2 words. It's "we do." All right, and then I have some questions for all of our young people, and your response is "we do," and then all of us, everybody else, is going to say "we do" as well. Okay, so I just want to let you know that it's really easy. Don't get lost. Okay. To you, teachers, let me say this. In taking on this responsibility, you have committed yourselves to nurturing the spirits of our youngest members of this congregation. You are placing love above self-interest, sympathy and kindness above harshness. You are placing teaching above sermons and coffee hour. Some of you have done this before, and others of you are doing this for the first time, and we appreciate and are grateful for your efforts in safeguarding the free spirit and passing our heritage to our children. Do you promise now before our young people and this congregation to do your best to honor them, teach them, and nurture their religious growth as Unitarian Universalists?
We do.
All right. Can I ask our young folks to stand up and also join us up here? Oh yeah. Oh, and the Religious Education Committee too. Oh, thank you. I get the good whisper in the ear. And also members of the Religious Education Committee, come on up here as well if you're here. Come on up. Come on. You have all the space up here to fill in. All the space up here to fill in. Excellent. Do you, children and young people of the church, promise to honor, respect, and nurture these teachers with your hearts and with your minds? Please respond with, "we do."
We do.
All right. I know you meant it. That's all right. Do you, the congregation of the First Parish of Milton, promise these teachers and young people your support, knowing that religion cannot be taught only in a classroom, but must also be encouraged in the home and beyond? Please respond with, "we do."
We do.
Oh, all right. Now that's the way to respond. That was good. Take up the challenge of this good work. May you have fun, grow and learn together, and be a continuing example of the importance of religious education both to us gathered here and to the world beyond. Amen. And now we're going to sing you all out, sing you off to your classes. You're going to head out, and if you don't know which class you're going to, just head out the door and let the folks handle it on the other side of the door. I don't. At this point, I don't care. I just want to get rid of you. I'm kidding. All right. Head on, sweetie.
Please turn to 634 in your gray hymnal. We're doing the reading together today. So I will begin, and you will respond back with the italicized portion. On turning. Now is the time for turning. The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south. The animals are beginning to turn to store their food for winter. For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful. It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are hard to do. God, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. Revive our lives as at the beginning.
"186 years ago, William Ellery Channing, the great Unitarian minister of the Arlington Street Church in Boston, wrote these words about educating the young. The end in religious instruction is not to stamp our minds upon the young, but to stir up their own. Not to make them see with our eyes, but to look inquiringly and steadily with their own. Not to give them a definite amount of knowledge, but to inspire a fervent love of truth. Not to form them an outward regularity, but to touch inward springs. Not to bind them with prejudices to our particular sect or particular notions, but to prepare them for impartial judging of whatever subjects may be offered to their decision. Not to burden the memory, but to quicken and strengthen the power of thought. Not to impose religion upon them in the form of arbitrary rules, but to awaken the conscious, moral discernment. In a word, the great end is to awaken the soul, to excite and cherish the spiritual life." I read this here on the opening Sunday of our, I read this last week at our teacher training, knowing that we'd be coming here at the start of the Sunday school year. And I told the teachers, those who came to the training, that even though it is almost 200 years old, it is still the way we understand the role of education in our faith. It is not to give our children a catechism of questions and answers, as much as it is to help them learn to ask the right questions. Heck, maybe just a question. Today's sermon is entitled, "Why?" It's part of the worship theme this month of who, what, why, and how, helping you get to know me and for you to gain some insight into the process and reasoning for interim ministry. It's about questions today. Why have an interim minister? Why have an interim minister? The short answer is to give you a chance to have someone different up here so you can spend time focusing on yourself and understand who you are so you go out and search and find the right person. To have an interim minister who is not just here as a placeholder, but is charged to lead you through the 5 tasks of interim ministry. And as you all remember from last week, the 5 tasks of interim ministry are, you're going to be hearing this a lot, so I'm just telling you now, right? Right? To come to terms with congregational history, to discover a new and evolving identity of this congregation, encourage you and your leadership to grow and to change, to rethink, rediscover, and revitalize connections and commitment to new leadership and a new future. Why? Why? A big part of my job is to ask you why you do certain things. Even if I already know the answer, and maybe I even agree with the answer, but I just want to see what you think it's about. We come to churches. Do you remember when first time you ever came into this church? Perhaps you came from another church, even maybe another Unitarian Universalist church, and you came in here and you walked in and you didn't know if you had to just stand up and kneel. Would people come forward during the offering? I remember seeing that in a Baptist church. That when it came time for the offering, the ushers came down in front. The minister said some words, and the ushers came forward, and they then turned around and stood at the front of the church with the plates. And then everyone stood up and came forward with their offering and dropped their offering in the plate, and then went back to their pews. And I was like, yeah, that's amazing. Wow, I'd never get away with that in Unitarian church, but wow, that was cool to see, But you come to the church for the first time, and you don't know what's going to happen. You come in, you kind of go, oh, it's cooler in here than it is outside. It must be air conditioning. This church must have a lot of money. Or it's just really thick walls and good windows. And something happens, and you don't quite know what happens and why that is. Why are there candles over here? Why are there? Where does everybody go at the end of the service? It's a question I have. I think I wrote about that in the link. Like, where should I stand at the end of the service? Should I stand back there and greet people going out the door, even though they're also going over there? Should I just stand over here? Then people told me, well, it depends on what the season is. People are going out, right? Everyone's shaking their heads, yeah. The things we learn, and I get to just ask the question, why is that? Why is that? As Channing wrote, not to stamp our minds upon the young, but to stir up their own. My job, in part of my job, is to make you look at this faith, at this church, and the ways you are doing things so that you understand the what and the why you are doing them. Now, maybe a question that you have for me is, why are you an interim minister, Hank? Why, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking. I spent 12 years as the settled minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Medford. And I had the opportunity to do some interim ministry up in Westford, which is up by Lowell. And I realized that after 12 years, even though I perhaps could have gone and gotten a settled position, that I realized that after 12 years, I needed an interim ministry as well. I needed a break in what I had been doing in ministry. I needed a chance to rest and be with a whole new group of folks. And while I was there, I realized I kind of like this. I kind of like this interim ministry. Will it be what I will always do? I don't know, but it's good right now. It suits, being an interim minister suits my personality, because I tend to be different from most other Unitarian Universalist ministers. In a denomination where 80% of the ministers and clergy are introverts, I'm like an ultra extrovert. Right? I love meeting people. I love being with crowds. I love really big crowds. I love looking at churches with fresh eyes and asking questions. Or at least I'm not afraid to ask difficult questions. Not uncomfortable questions like, why are you wearing those horizontal stripes? I did a quick look to see if anybody was wearing. Okay, and if you are, that's great. You look great in it. But sometimes people ask questions, and now everyone's looking around. I feel really bad. Okay, but questions about why a church does things. My very first day here, I was looking around, and I couldn't find the men's room. I said, why is that? I eventually found it, and there was no sign there. It had been taken down and stashed in a drawer someplace. Like, what? Had anybody else seen that? Everyone else, most of the folks who need to use that room know where the door is. But if you're visiting for the first time, you didn't. I get to ask a bunch of questions of you and see how well you answer them. Last week, I asked you about your mission statement, and there was quiet. I asked, do you know what it is? Crickets. I asked, do you know where you can find it? Crickets. But that's great. That's good. That's good. That's good for me to ask you these questions and for you to realize, like, oh, I don't know them. Maybe we should know it. Maybe we need to have a one that it's easier for us to memorize. I have some other questions for you all. Last Sunday morning, I was running around in the kitchen. I was looking for a garbage bag, and I opened a cabinet, and I found in there a stack of the Alcoholics Anonymous books, because they're one of the people who use our facilities during the week. And I was like, oh, that's what that is. And I opened the next cabinet, and in there were was like 3 bottles of wine. And I thought to myself, why is the wine stored next to the AA material? And we can take a step back. Why is there wine in the church? I mean, I don't know what if there's been conversations about alcohol in the church, but like, why is there wine in the church? Why is it in the kitchen if there is wine in the? Well, okay. Why do I have some more? I have a bunch more questions. Why do committees in this church meet on Sundays? So many of you meet on Sundays. One of the 10 commandments is to keep the Sabbath holy. And yet you fill it up with committee meetings. I'm just, and once again, I'm new. You'll tell me why, and that might make a lot of sense, but I just want to throw that out and ask that question. If it's so easy for you to break that one of the 10 commandments, I don't know what else is going on in this church. Maybe that's where I'm really going with that question. And then there are bigger questions that I want you to think about these next 2 years, about the role this church plays in your life and in the life of this community. If we were to cancel worship, who would miss it? Oh, okay. Oh, the good. Well, I'm guessing you. Yes, thank you. I'm glad you all for being here. If we were to cancel, if this church was to close, who would notice? You all would notice. Who in the town would notice? Maybe the folks who the preschool would notice, and the Alcoholics Anonymous and some other groups. But who else in the town would notice? What part of your church life is spiritually deepening? I've got a question too. This might be a little difficult, and I've talked about this with the transition team a couple times, and I brought this up, and they've assured me that it's that I'm reading it a little differently than everyone else. But I wonder, because I haven't really heard that much from folks about missing Parisa. People say, and folks in the transition say, no, folks miss Parisa. Maybe that's true. I haven't heard it. Maybe it's because I keep saying, I'm pretty fired and I'm going to leave, and you feel like you don't want to share things with me. But I'm going to be here for 2 years. I want to know how you're feeling. Because this is part of the grieving process, part of maybe because Parisa didn't go to a different church, so there's no rivalry, there's no sense of she went someplace better, maybe someplace better than us. Instead, Parisa went to the district. She's going to be doing other work. But I haven't heard from folks saying, I really miss her, or, man, I was shocked when this happened. I haven't heard that from you all. And I want to make sure that you're dealing with this and processing this grief well, so that it doesn't come and bite me in the butt later on, right? That you haven't dealt with this grief, or more importantly, it doesn't bite the next minister in the butt, because all of a sudden no one's dealt with their grief, and then all of a sudden they do something that's really different from the way Parisa would have done it, and you get really mad at that person. That's not fair. It's okay for you to get mad at me. That's part of my job. I understand. There is a religious impulse to ask questions. I really think it is. It's something. I mean, when you look in religious scriptures, there is the story of Jacob wrestling with God, and at the end, Jacob asks God, "Tell me your name." All right, tell me your name. And then in the Christian scriptures, Jesus asks his followers. When they ask him, are you Jehovah? Are you God? Are you a prophet? Jesus asks them, who do you say I am? And of course, and even in Zen Buddhism, there's that whole tradition of the koan, of asking those questions that don't seem to have any answers. You know, the sound of one hand clapping. You know, it's questioning is part. Questioning is about going on a quest to find an answer, right? It's about a quest. It's about a journey to find an answer. You know, Judaism did a really remarkable thing because it wasn't afraid to ask questions, or people who were leaders weren't afraid to ask questions at a really crazy time in their history. Judaism changed its entire structure in order to survive. Judaism was a faith that was based around a temple, around a building in a place with a set schedule, and that people came there, they brought their sacrifices there, they brought their children there. All of these rituals happened there in Jerusalem, in the temple that King Solomon had built. They brought their rituals, they brought their sacrifices there, and then one day, the temple was no more. And they needed to reinvent their faith. They changed their faith from being one that was centered around a temple to one that was centered around a rabbi and centered around teachings that happened at home and around a particular community. This coming Wednesday is the start of the Jewish High Holy Days. It begins with Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. And the High Holy Days continue for 10 days. It's traditionally seen as a time of processing, of self-evaluation, of acknowledgement of guilt, and then of repentance, and finally for pleas for forgiveness. It's known as the Days of Awe. Days of Awe, A-W-E. Yom Kippur is that final day, the Day of Atonement. It's the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. It is a day when, if you have done things right, made amends, that your name will be written in the book of life for another year. In Judaism, you have Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. The book of life is opened. And then for the next period, next 10 days, you have those 10 days to go and to make amends and to ask for forgiveness for all the people that you might have wronged throughout the church year, throughout the year. And you have to, it's about atoning for sins that you've made, not against God, for sins, but for sins against another person. To atone for sins against another person, you must first seek reconciliation with that person, righting the wrongs you committed if possible, and all must be done before Yom Kippur. That's what happens now, right? That's what's happening. That's what will happen with our friends who are Jewish in these next 2 weeks. But when Judaism was a faith centered around a temple in Jerusalem, Yom Kippur, right, the Day of Atonement was performed by the high priest, right? And he performed these rituals to atone for the sin between humanity and God. And on the morning of that great day, he would get up, he would wash, he would dress in these white robes. And then he would offer a sacrifice, a bull or a goat on behalf of the priesthood. And then he'd enter into the Holy of Holies, the Sanctum Sanctorum, that place centered in the middle of the temple, that place where God sat on the Ark of the Covenant. We've all seen those movies, right? Those right? And there's a box there, and these angels, and the wings of the angels reach up, and just where those angels' wings meet, that is the seat where God sits in that little space. And the high priest only goes into the Holy of Holies once a year. And this is the day, and the Day of Atonement. And the priest goes in there, the high priest goes in there. And he would offer a goat. He would say some prayers, and he'd bring a goat, and he would ask all of the sins of the nation of Israel were then taken through him onto this goat. All of the sins of Israel, every person's sins were then placed onto this goat. Now, historically, the goat is then sort of brought out to the wilderness and is set free where it's eaten by an animal with big teeth. But what really happened in the temple, because they couldn't go all the way out to the wilderness, is that there were all these passages inside. Right? They'd bring the goat out in front of everyone. Everyone would cheer, hooray! And then he'd bring the goat back in, and they'd bring this goat down these passages, and the goat would be sort of thrown down to its death. All of the sins of the nation of Israel were put onto this goat, which was then killed. It is the scapegoat. The scapegoat. And then the destruction of the temple came in the year 70. And they went, what do we do? How do we transform our religion? How do we transform a religion that was based about having a place where we could do these rituals and these things? We have these people who would do this stuff. What do we do now? But what was going on in Israel leading up, you see it in the Christian scriptures, there were people asking questions. There were Pharisees, people who were known as Pharisees, who were asking questions. You see them in the Christian scriptures all the time asking Jesus, well, how can you heal people on the Sabbath? We're not supposed to, they're asking questions all the time. It is these people that, after the destruction of the temple and Judaism said, what do we do? We no longer have a place to be. They said, no longer shall our faith be one that is based in a place. It is a religion that's to be it's going to be based around teachers, learned people, and we will form communities around it. It is such a strong idea that the founders of this church, the Puritans, looked at those teachings and said, this is the way that we should set up our church, not with a hierarchy, but around a church, right? You all know, like Milton could not have become Milton if it didn't have a church and a minister, right? You know that? Like this, it wouldn't count as a town. Like in order for Milton to break away from Dorchester, it had to have a church and a minister, and this is that church. I'm telling you all of this for 3 reasons. First, as an example of a faith transformed by asking questions. Right? And this church gets to ask those questions about itself, too. You all get to ask questions these next 2 years about who you want to be, how you want to be. I don't think you want to get rid of this temple. But you might want to have other things you might want to change. You might want to ask people about how we do things, how you organize yourselves, how you come into relationship with each other in this place. Second, because religious life here is changing. Religious life in North America is changing, right? It's changing here in this church because your settled ministers left, and you'll be exploring ways to discover who you are without that person. So you can hire the next settled minister who will then lead you in a new direction. But religious life in the West is changing. People say they are more spiritual than they are religious. Personally, I'm much more of I'm more religious than I am spiritual, right? And that's part of because I'm an institutionalist in some ways. But just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and even the early Christians who asked questions because they saw that things were changing. People in our cultures today are asking questions about how the church works. Who gets to be the leaders of churches? How should we meet? Where should we meet? There are little churches popping up all over the place that meet in bars on Sunday afternoons. They meet in coffee shops. They meet in people's homes. They don't necessarily feel like they need to have a big building. Now, the third reason why I am telling you all this is that as an interim minister, part of my role is to be the scapegoat, right? As I said, I'm pre-fired, right? So when I leave, I take away with me all of your sins. Or at least I'll be taking away those uncomfortable questions that you might ask me and that I might ask you about this place and about your lives, and allow you to transition from stories of yourselves, all right? I mean, Parisa might have known you as someone who had cancer. And the next minister might know you as a cancer survivor. And this time here is a time for you to retell your story to yourself, to the people around you, as you go through changes. I mean, those are just examples, but it's an easy one for you to understand. The interim time is a time for change, a time for trying out new things, a time for failing and forgiving yourself and others. The transition time, this interim time, is a time for turning. As Rabbi Jack Reimer reminded us in our reading this morning, the leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange. Birds are beginning to turn and head south. But for us, turning does not come so easily. It is an act of will to make a turn, breaking old habits, admitting that you've been wrong, which is never easy, losing faith, starting all over again, saying I'm sorry. Turning means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are hard to do. Making a change, seeing that things will be different, is hard to do. But unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. And the rabbi writes, God, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. Turn us around, O God, and bring us back towards you. Revive our lives as at the beginning, and turn us towards each other, God, for in isolation there is no life. Amen. Our next hymn, I just want to tell you a little bit about it. This hymn, you probably haven't sung before. It's not super popular, but it's important to me in that this hymn was written by the Reverend Bruce Findlow, who was the minister who performed my parents' wedding. And Bruce Findlow was the minister of St. Mark's Unitarian Church in Edinburgh, Scotland. And with Scotland in the news, I thought, what a perfect time for us to sing this hymn. It's a lovely hymn. For all that is our life, it is number 128 in the Gray Hymnals, 128. Please rise as you are able. Let us open our hearts in prayer. Thou, you great mystery that permeates all nature, be with us as we begin a new church year again. And our young people begin their new year at church school. We celebrate this new year and rejoice the opportunity to be together today. At this time when the people of the Jewish community are celebrating their new year, their time of self-examination and review of their relationship with each other and with their God, how different are we who must re-examine our relationships with each other, our relationships to that which gives us meaning, to that which is sacred and holy in our lives. Just as the rabbi blows the ram's horn that calls all of Israel to be mindful of God's creation, we too must be mindful of our responsibility to each other and to this world. And so we think of all of those people who've traveled to New York City to be there during the People's Climate March, to raise awareness of the importance of creation and our responsibility to it. Elise asks that we think of her friend Greg, who is starting chemotherapy this coming week. And Joy, who is joyful that her nephew Seamus has gotten an all clear on his heart problems. And Marie Laurie, whose Aunt Agnes, who just passed away yesterday, the family matriarch. God, we ask for us to recognize that each day is a new year here in the gathering of this church. Every time we come here, there is a new congregation. Even if the same people arrive here each week, it is a new congregation because our lives make a difference in this place. Our lives outside have been influenced by the world, and we bring that world with us when we come here. So this congregation changes because of the world outside. It is a new life, a new sharing that we have. May it be a blessing to us all as we work towards creating a new future for ourselves and for the world around us. Holy One, grant us the ability to find joy and strength, not in the strident calls to arms, but in stretching out our arms to grasp our fellow creatures in the striving for justice and truth. Amen. Let us be in silence together for a few moments. Amen. All that this congregation is and all that it has, we bring to it. The first act of transformation is the giving of ourselves, and the offering is our opportunity to turn our ideals into actions, and we invite you to give generously. The offering will now be given and received.
Please join me in singing our final hymn, number 290, also the great hymnal, Bring, O Pastor, on our 290. means asking passionately the question of the meaning of our existence and being willing to receive answers, even if those answers hurt. Our worship is over. Our service begins. Go in peace.